Well, we are having some fun. We're celebrating actually the fact that a lot of you have been working incredibly hard and just doing a good job of just saying, how do we work through some issues of life that maybe we struggle with, things that just cause struggles and hardships in our lives. And so we're celebrating the fact that a lot of us have made a decision to say, you know what, specifically in the area of our finances, let's do something different than what we've been doing before. So back in January, we actually had a series that we entitled Set for Life, and in that series we talked about just how do we do life differently, so we don't struggle as much as we do. And we talked about finances. Dave Ramsey was with us to kick off that series, and here's the amazing thing, 11,053 of you said, you know what, let's do this differently. Let's do something different with our lives, and let's make sure that we're just managing our finances the way God says to manage them. And so if you'd have told me a year ago that we could have convinced 11,053 of us to do this, spend $69 a piece, go to a 9-week course, I don't know that I would have thought that was going to be possible. And yet, way to go for jumping in and being a part of this. And I know that it's not 100% figured out, and I know that we're going to struggle. I know there'll be advances forward, and we'll stumble backwards, but just way to go for saying you want your life to be different when it comes to your finances. Now, what happens is whenever we struggle in particular areas of our lives, we also find ourselves at times just experiencing shame, where we go, I wouldn't want anybody else to know what I'm experiencing right now. I wouldn't want anybody else to know how I manage my money. Wouldn't want anybody else to know how I'm struggling. Shame pops up in all kind of areas of our lives, but it can also happen in the area of our finances. And so over the last couple of weeks, we've been in a series that we've entitled God Knows Your Story. And the thing is, He does. He knows your story. He knows my story. But the cool part is, even though He knows our story, even though He knows the amount of times that we struggle, that we mess up, that we do things improperly, that we just trip up and fail, God still loves us, and He's not mad at us. And so if you want to go further in kind of what we've been talking about over the last several weeks, we've been basing this study off of a book entitled God Knows Your Story, and it's available out in the atrium, all of our locations. Great read, worth your time, just to dig a little further and go further in this particular series. Now, here's what happens with our lives. We struggle, whether it's with finances, whether it's, so many different areas. Where maybe you were labeled as a kid. Something happened to you as a kid where somebody labeled you, they put a label on you. You haven't been able to shake that label since you were a kid. Or maybe you did something and you labeled yourself, and all of a sudden now you can't shake the fact that you told a lie. And so you've told yourself, I didn't just tell a lie, I'm a liar. And you labeled yourself as a liar, I'm a cheater, or I'm an adulterer, or I'm just a fat person, or I'm slow-minded, or whatever it may be, and you labeled yourself, and you haven't been able to shake that label, and so inside, that's how you see yourself. Inside, you're kind of discouraged as to who you are. Inside, you feel shame, because you say, if everybody else knew how I really was, then they wouldn't like me. So if I were to give you a definition of shame, it would be this. Shame is the inability to accept yourself. Where you go, I don't like who I am. I don't like kind of the way I do life. I just don't like myself. You can't accept yourself, not be comfortable in your own skin. You're not even able to enjoy who you are because you've labeled yourself and you've got this thing going on called shame. And you also, shame is the fear that somehow, some way, you're going to be revealed for who you really are. And if people knew who you were, man, there's no way they're going to like you. There's no way they're going to accept you. There's no way they're going to love you anymore. And so all of a sudden, you've got this sense of shame. And so what we do when we experience shame is we pretend. And we posture ourselves and we pose to be somebody different than we are because we don't want people to really know. Otherwise, they wouldn't love us anymore. And we do that with God as well because we have this sense that, oh man, if God really knew who I was, He wouldn't love me anymore. And so we experience shame in our lives. And so it happens in all areas of our lives. And let me just give you an example of how it happens when it comes to our finances. And so with our finances, what begins to happen is you find yourself in a situation where you're accumulating debt, and that debt just continues to grow and grow and grow, and it begins to feel out of control. But it's even beyond that. All you're doing is making minimum payments on your credit cards, and you're just barely surviving doing that, and it's interest only. You don't know that you'll ever pay off those cards. You're just hanging on by the skin of your teeth. You realize if all it would take is one paycheck, missing one paycheck and we're done. I mean, there's no way we're going to survive. We're just done. Can't get beyond that. Constantly fighting about money at home with your spouse, with your kids, anybody that gets in your way. You're fighting about money because there's just not enough to go around because of the way you've been managing it, and you're not been able to. Saving is the last thing you even think about. Well, how could we possibly save? We're not even making the payments now. How could we possibly think about saving money? And so you find yourself just under this huge amount of stress and pressure because of what's going on with your money. And the bottom line, you can't even live the way God created you to live. And God designed for you to live this amazing life, and yet you can't even experience it, all because of the way that you're managing your money. And so you begin not only to struggle with your finances, but then you begin to experience this shame and thinking, oh man, I'm a failure. I'm no good. I'm not worth anything. And so you begin to beat yourself up because of shame and what you're experiencing in your life, and you think nobody's going to love me, nobody's going to care. But if they knew what I was really like, then there's no way they would accept me anymore. Now, again, shame happens in all kinds of areas of our lives. And so the last several weeks, we've been talking about how do we deal with shame. And I want to give you 3 steps today just to begin to heal from the shame that you're experiencing. I would encourage you to go back and catch the whole series online, but let me just give you 3 steps to begin to heal from the shame that you may be experiencing for whatever area of life you're experiencing. And the first step is just name your shame. Just call it out. Just say what it is. This is what's causing my shame. Maybe it's finances. Maybe it's just your physical body. Maybe it's things that you've done in the past. Maybe it's actions maybe it's labels, nicknames that people gave you. Name it. What is it that's causing you shame? Because you can't move into your preferred future without first looking back and dealing with the past. And it's counterintuitive. You don't want to look past. You've already experienced that. You want to move as far away from the past as you can, but you can't move forward until you deal with the past. A preferred future that God says, look, this is what I have planned for you. It's an amazing thing. He says that I've got planned for you. I want you to experience it. So you begin by naming your shame. The second step is just share your shame. Don't hide it. Don't try to cover it up. The more we try to cover it up, the more it just kind of builds on itself. And so a trusted friend, a counselor, somebody where you just go ahead and you just declare and say, look, this is what I'm actually struggling with. And you share that. So you name your shame, you share your shame. And the last step is just begin to ask God that your heart will be flooded with light, where you can begin to see yourself the way He sees you, where you can begin to see yourself and say, okay, what are the areas that I need to go to work on? Let me ask you to grab a Bible. Open it up to the book of Ephesians. It's page 895, and the Bible's there at your seats. There should be Bibles around you at all of our locations. Ephesians chapter 1. A man named Paul is actually writing, and he actually says, look, this is what he asked God for the people that he's writing to. And as we see what he's asking for, I would say this is what we ought to be asking God for ourselves as well, all of the time. Ephesians chapter 1, I'm going to begin reading in verse 18. As Paul talks about, this is what he prays for his readers. But again, this is what we ought to be asking God for ourselves. He says, verse 18, I pray that your hearts will be flooded with light. He says, I'm just asking God that your hearts will be filled with light so that you can see things as they really are, not how you think they are, not how other people tell you they are, but so you can see things as they really are. I pray that your hearts will be flooded with light so that, here's why he asked for that. So that, first of all, you can understand the confident hope that he has given to those that he called. He says, I'm just asking that God gives you this light. He floods you with light so that you can see yourself, first of all, so that you can see yourself as God sees you. So you can see yourself with the confidence of your calling. Your calling is the fact that he's called you to be a son. He's called you to be his daughter. And what an amazing thing that through Jesus, you can be the son of God. Through Jesus, you can be the daughter of God. And he says, first of all, I just want God to flood your heart with light so that you'll see yourself the way he sees you. And he doesn't see you as a cheater. He doesn't see you as a liar. He doesn't see you as an adulterer. He doesn't see you as being fat. He doesn't see you as being slow-minded. He doesn't see you however you think you see yourself. He doesn't see you that way. When he looks at you, he sees you according to your calling. You're his son. You're his daughter that he loves deeply. So first Paul says, look, I just ask that God would flood your heart with light so that you can understand who you are. He goes on, he says, I ask God to flood your heart with light so that you can understand his holy people who are his rich and glorious inheritance. And this is a fascinating one to me. He throws out the idea of inheritance. We all know what inheritance is. We all hope someday we'll receive an inheritance, if not from our parents, then some long-lost rich uncle or aunt that we never knew anything about, and we're going to receive this inheritance. It's going to be amazing. I mean, we know what an inheritance is. What Paul is actually saying here is God gets an inheritance too, but you know what his inheritance is? It's you and me. We're his inheritance. And we kind of look like, oh, sorry, God, you kind of lost on that one. And yet he's going, no. I want that. That's what he wants as his inheritance. He could have anything that he wants as his inheritance, but he says, look, you are my inheritance. And he looks at that, shows how valuable you are to him. It just shows you're not to him a liar. You're not to him a cheater. You're not to him this kind of screw up. He says, no. You need to understand you're my inheritance. You're my son. You're my daughter. Paul goes on, verse 19. He says, I ask God to flood your heart with light so that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated him in the place of honor at God's right hand and in heavenly realms. Now he is far above any ruler or authority or power or leader or anything else, not only in this world, but also in the world to come. He says, look, I ask God to flood you with light so that you'll understand the incomparable power of God. But not just so that you know it, so that you actually experience his incomparable power. So that as you begin to realize and see yourself the way God sees you as a son, as a daughter of his, as you begin to see yourself as having incredible value because all of a sudden you realize, man, I am what God is waiting for. He could have anything, but he wants me, he wants you. And then to begin to experience his incomparable power, there's nothing like it. And he could change your life, and he can change my life. And the way that we've seen ourselves for years and years and years, and the shame that we've carried because of how we imagine ourselves to be. God says, it's not that way at all. So I love you as a son, I love you as a daughter. My inheritance with the power to change your life, to be the person that God wants you to be. And this happens as God floods our hearts and lives with light, and it can take effect in whatever area of our lives that we struggle with, whether it's finances, whether it's whatever it is that we struggle with. God says, I can change your life. Your life can be different. Now, here's the cool thing. When you begin to understand all of this, then all of a sudden you have a sense of who you are. You're not who you thought you were, but you are who God thinks you are. And so who am I? Who are you? You and I, we are a chosen, holy, blameless, adopted, redeemed, forgiven, sealed with the Holy Spirit, seated in heaven, child of God. That's who you are. Whatever label somebody gave you years ago, whatever label you put on yourself, that's not it. This is who you are. You are a chosen son of God. You are a chosen daughter of God. And when you begin to understand this, and if you need to, you ask God again and again and again, God, tell me one more time, just remind me one more time, who am I? And so you ask him to flood your heart with light, remind me again. Because those old nicknames, those old stories, they keep coming back again and again and again, and they trip us up time and time again. But you ask God, remind me of who I am, and all of a sudden, over time, life begins to change, and you begin to understand you are a chosen son or daughter of God. So the reason why we're celebrating today is 11,053 of us have said, when it comes to our finances, we want to experience life differently than we've been experiencing it. We want to get beyond the shame that we felt of just being poor money managers. And so adopting new styles and new practices, and we've been utilizing a tool called Financial Peace University. It's a 9-week class, tools of just explaining how God says to do life with our finances. And here's the thing you need to understand. When we do life the way God says to do it, typically, most often, it goes better. Life just goes better when we choose to go about it his way. And so that's what's been happening for 11,053 of us with our finances. And again, I understand we're still going to trip up. I understand we haven't gotten it all figured out. I understand there will be times that we fall short, and I get that. But the fact that we're taking steps to move this way is kind of an amazing deal. So let me just tell you what's happened as we've been kind of experiencing all that with our finances. First of all, when it comes to the amount of debt that we've been able to pay down, interestingly, on average, for these 11,053 people, on average, $5,142.48 in debt has been paid down. That's credit card kind of debt, consumer debt that's just been before minimum payments, now all of a sudden over $5,000 paid out in a 10 to 12 week period. This is just the start, but in a 10 to 12 week period. Secondly, savings is amazing, $4,315.14, where before we'd say we couldn't even think about saving money. All of a sudden, $5,000 in debt is paid, $4,000 is put aside in savings. Incredible when you think about that and the impact it makes on each family, on each person. Now, you put all that together, if 11,053 people actually experienced each of these things, the numbers get staggering. That means $56,839,831 in debt, credit card debt, consumer debt has been paid down just in a 10 to 12 week period. That also means from a savings standpoint, $47,695,242 has been put aside in savings. Those numbers are staggering. And you just kind of go, oh my goodness, that's an amazing thing. So that's why we're celebrating, say, way to go for being a part of that. Now, we just kind of were thinking about and saying, wouldn't it be fun to think, what could we do with that kind of money if we had that opportunity? So let's think about it from an individual standpoint. What could you do if you saved $4,315.14? What could you do with that if you wanted to that you couldn't have done 10 or 12 weeks ago? And so a couple of thoughts come to mind. $3, that's not for you to buy coffee, that's for you to buy coffee for the person behind you in line as you buy coffee. You couldn't have done that before. And all of a sudden, you can be generous, or if you wanted to buy everybody in line, you could actually, 1,438 people you could buy coffee for if you so chose to. $125, you could actually take your family of four to dinner, go to a movie, a bucket of popcorn even, if you so chose to do that. $1,000, $500, $1,000 is what it costs to buy a dog. You might say the average cost of buying a dog, you might say we want a dog for our family, $500 the average cost to take care of that dog every year. You could go out and buy yourself a dog. Now the only problem is this only gets you 6.5 years out. I don't know what you'll do 6.5 years out. You explain to the kids the dog is gone. You have to tell them why, but that's you. $1,800, you can get a tutor for your 8th grade son in math if you so chose to. $2,080, piano lessons for a year. Now, I would think this is a terrible investment. I got to tell you. I mean, how many of us have taken piano lessons ever in our lives? Let me just see your hands, all of our locations, if you've ever taken piano lessons. So it looks like a vast majority of us. Now, my second question is, I only lasted less than 3 months in piano lessons. How many of us lasted less than 3 months in piano lessons? So, bad investment. But if you so choose, then go ahead and do that. $5,000, you could take your family to Disney for a week, and so we only get 6 days. We don't have quite 5,000, but for 6 days, you could take your family to Disney. You could do that if you wanted to because you've been saving money. Or let's put it all together. What could we do collectively if we decided to do something with our money? Well, $47 million is what we have to work with. So let me tell you a couple things. 151, what this represents. Let's say you're tired of standing in line when you go buy coffee every day. And so we decide, you know what, we're gonna buy ourselves 151 Starbucks franchises. That way we don't have to stand in line anymore. We could do that if we wanted to. 737, let's say you decide you're tired of flying on other people's airplanes, you wanna own your own plane. 737 is an airplane. Right now they're cheap. You can get 737s cheap. Might be what you wanna do. 5 years. If we wanted to, for 5 years, we could pay the entire budget of Water Street Rescue Mission for 5 years, if we so chose. 5,662, we could actually contact World Vision. We could sponsor 5,662 kids from birth all the way to adulthood, change their lives, change their communities, their families' lives, their communities' lives, maybe even change a continent if we chose to get involved. I mean, these are just things, I'm not saying we should do these. I'm saying these are things that we could do, all because we're just managing money God's way. And it's kind of an incredible thing as you begin to step back and you look and you say, okay, what could we do? Now, here's what you need to understand. All of what we're even celebrating, it's not even about the money because it's bigger than the money. When you begin to do God's life God's way, then he doesn't just change the specific area that you're working on, he changes your whole life. And so it's about money, but it's not about money. Because here's what we're hearing from people again and again, because of what they've experienced, yeah, it's about money, but it's not. They're saying in our home, there's less fighting going on. With my husband, with my wife, with my kids, it's just not there. The fighting has diminished. Our communication skills are better. We're talking about things that we never talked about before, and so communication is so much better, and we're free from stress. It's not just this constant, are we gonna make it this week? Can I get through another day? What happens if I miss a paycheck? Freedom from the shame of just saying, I'm a failure when it comes to finances. So a freedom from shame, and beyond that, just saying, you know what, we're finally able to think about living life the way God created us to live, and what an amazing thought that could possibly be. And so don't ever make the mistake of thinking when you choose to follow God that it's just about this one thing, because it's not, it's always bigger. And with our finances, as we follow him that way, then all of a sudden everything else begins to change and our lives are different. I don't know what's causing shame in your life. Maybe it's finances. If it is finances, then Financial Peace University is a great tool. And as you leave at atriums, all of our locations, there's a place called Next Steps just outside in the atrium, and they'll tell you, hey, here's how to jump into financial peace, or whatever area that you're struggling with shame, then they'd be more than happy to say, let me help you out. If today you just wanted to pray with somebody, and you say, it's not money, whatever it may be, then always after every gathering, to my right, to your left, there are people up in the front corner of every auditorium that would love to pray with you. But understand who you are. You are a child of God, a son or a daughter of God. And whatever image you may have of yourself, God says, you got the wrong image. Through Jesus, you're my son. Through Jesus, you're my daughter. I've chosen, you're my inheritance, he says. So I want you to hear some stories of people whose lives are just changing because of Financial Peace University, because of the decision to say, I'm gonna jump in and I want my finances to be different. I wanna manage my money the way God says to manage my money. And so I want you to hear some stories, and as you hear the stories, maybe they resonate with you and you go, hey, that's what I'm experiencing too, if you've been a part of this. If you haven't been a part of it, maybe you go, hey, this is what I need to happen in my life. And so listen to the stories, and as you listen to the stories, I would just say to the 11,053 of us that have been going through this, hey, way to go. Way to go for taking steps to make your life different so that you can truly be a life that's changed by Christ. Listen to the stories.
Hey.
Hello.
Good, how are you?
So this is...
I'm Kevin.
This is Kevin.
Mason.
Mason.
Good to see you. Michelle, good to see you.
Jamie.
Jamie and Jake. Nice to meet you. I'm here to hang out with you guys and talk. So.
I haven't done any of those sales. You do like all of your own pricing.
What was it like before? Even as you were growing up, or just before marriage? How was that?
That's all I really understood.
You knew you were poor?
We knew we were poor.
Oh,
That's
he couldn't get what he wanted, is what he said.
AKA we were poor.
I live paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes by Thursday afternoon there was like $8 left in my bank account, and that just was normal. But when we got married, that just freaked Michelle out.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the end of the month, we'd be like, well, I think I spent a little bit too much over here, so now I need to work more. And that would kind of add a little bit of stress.
Consistently, we would argue about spending money. Almost every month, I would say.
It was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
That's the norm now. You fight over money. Like,
Yeah.
that's your normal argument.
And like you just put up with it, like we're gonna be married 50 years.
Right, and we're always gonna fight about money.
They tell you that before you get married. It's like, okay, I guess we'll.
So we just accept it, right? Yeah. So what's it like now?
Now I feel like there's like, I don't know, there's more communication. The communication is better now. Like, it's not like as soon as he walks in the door, I say, what did you spend $30 on? You know what I mean?
But like through all the classes, it kind of took us to, here's our plan, this is what we both want to do. We can hold each other accountable, but ultimately we have the same goal.
It helped us pay for my undergrad, Michelle's master's degree, and we were able to kind of plan and set money aside and not have to just take out student loans blindly. So that just helped set us up to not be weighed down by all this debt.
Okay.
And even with the kids, like, if it was up to Owen, we would go to Taco Bell every day. and they see me checking the app on my phone, and I'm telling them, like, well, I have to look if there's any money. That communication is there, and it's building. And
So how old are they?
almost 6, 4, and 2.
So they're starting to learn. Their first memories are going to be like, there's not an indefinite amount of this thing.
Yes.
We have to be strategic. That's pretty cool. Did you have that growing up?
No.
Yeah.
I feel excited to know that like our kids are gonna benefit from the choices we're making now.
I don't know that we would have had that college planning discussion until she was a lot older and possibly saved and planned to go that route, because it wasn't on my radar. I'll tell you that.
So that is one story from one life group among the thousands of people who stepped into Financial Peace University this winter here at our church. As I got to get around, what I loved is I saw high schoolers all the way up to retired folks. I saw some couples who honestly have a lot to others who are just scraping by. I saw single moms, I saw widowed spouses. I saw so many different people who were coming together and saying, we want to do better in the area of our finances. We want to do it God's way. And so the Whittles Life Group story then kind of becomes our story, right? As we step into this. What we've experienced with money is we've experienced hurt, even some tension, right? Hard to communicate. We've made mistakes with money in the past, and this is what we've known so far. But then because of financial peace, man, things get to change. And I don't know if you heard the question being asked, but it said, so what is different for you now? What is different for you now? And they listed off things like, man, we communicate more. Our expectation is greater. We just have more knowledge, and we have a plan, right? And those are all great things, all things that they said. But I don't know if you caught what they didn't say. And you could hear it in the tone of their voice, and you could see it in their eyes. And what's different now when it comes to their finances, when it comes to our finances, is we have hope. We have hope, right? And because we have hope, our faith and trust in God is growing. So while I'm so excited, happy that as a church we're paying down debt, we're saving money, we're investing well, I'm equally as excited that in this season we have hope. And in this season our faith and trust in God is growing. You can't put a price tag on that.
Good vibes.
Yeah, it's been a good one. Need to go check out Urban Air.
Urban Air.
That's what I need to go
Awesome.
see. Yeah,
Great
that's awesome.
trampoline park.
That's cool. You guys have a seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking about your story.
Yeah.
FPU's been a good experience for you guys, and it sounds like, and life was pretty different for you about 5 years ago, right? Like, what did life look like? What was going on?
5 years ago, he was actually laid off.
The company I was working for went bankrupt, so they let it go the staff.
We had a toddler at the time, so just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. I was a teacher at the time, and we were surviving on my teaching salary, and he was working part-time hours with a tow truck company just to try to make some ends meet. And before you know it, we were so many months behind on our mortgage that we actually went into foreclosure, and we were deep in credit card debt. We were using credit cards to buy groceries, using credit cards to buy gas. We couldn't afford just our basic lifestyle. We need to have it now type of attitude, just right back into some of the mistakes that we had made. And FPU has opened our eyes to what we already knew and then so much more.
Was it an instantaneous or would?
For me, it was instantaneous.
I was not so much. I'm probably the more frivolous spender, I guess, between the two of us. If I see it, I want it, I'm buying it. So she kind of hones me in and reels me in sometimes, and thank God for her.
It was, we need to make a change now. Now we're both no longer working with our jobs. We own 3 businesses out of our household, and that has a whole different dynamic. The first week of FPU, we were like, this is unbelievable. But it also really put some tests on our marriage. I think that's we didn't know that going in, and we had lived so long with, I'm in charge of the bills, we have one joint account, we have separate accounts, and you just put in the joint account. So I never knew his spending habits until FPU. Wow. And we never talked about money. It was, hey, put X amount into the joint account. So that first night, I'm saying, hey, we're ready to cut up our credit cards, and he's having like heart palpitations. Cut up what? Yeah. It took him 30 minutes to cut up one card.
So did it take you some convincing? Did it take some convincing to get you to register for it?
Oh, I was scared that we were gonna have to cut back on memories with our family. I think that's where the nerves came in. But at the same time, we were like, we need this now so we can make a better future for our son. We want to live a life that is cash dependent. We don't want to live a life anymore by credit, because this is how we got back into this rut. Let's shop on a budget. Let's be more conscious of coupons. It just taught us how to be more conscious about the life that we're living and just to make those types of decisions. But I think my favorite part is that we're doing it together. Every week we have a budget meeting. We sit down, we talk about it, and it's opened our marriage up to like this new aspect. And it's, for me, I feel like I've fallen a little deeper in love too. That sounds super cheesy, by the way, but.
Awesome. Me too.
Oh.
That's awesome. I've heard story after story, just like Derek and Madi, where priorities have been refocused, where we've been seeing relationships healed, where we've been seeing life change, where we've been seeing people focus on their careers, on school, on self-care, on marriages being stronger. And it's all because people have been focused on getting finances out of the way and being freed up to live a life that God's called us to live. So with almost 800 people experiencing Financial Peace University here at Branch Creek in Harleysville, I get incredibly excited about what that means for our future. Not just the future of us as individuals, as families, as a church, or even our community here in Harleysville, but the future of thousands and thousands of lives that are going to be changed by the decisions we've made, by the impact of reprioritizing our goals to center around what's most important, recentered around God's purposes and plans for our lives. What's been incredibly cool is being able to sit next to someone and hear their story and hear how this has been so much more about finances. That may be the way that it started for them. They may have started thinking, I need to get my finances in order, but sitting next to someone this past week and hearing, and I was in toxic relationships, and refocusing my priorities through FPU has caused me to wake up to the fact that I need to make some changes in many areas in my life. And it's not just about my money, it's actually about how I do life in general. And so it's been life-changing for so many people. Someone else told me that, man, they just didn't even have an idea of where to start. That they felt like their house was completely out of order. They had no idea where to start cleaning the financial mess. They said, now I actually am in control of my finances, so I'm in control of my future, and I can allow God to direct me in that. So that's where it becomes very real, and where life change is happening, something that seems so practical that God's been able to work right in the middle of. It's been an incredible experience.
Hey, I'm good. Yeah, did you have a good day today?
I did.
Yeah, it was a good day. First day of spring. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, man, did you get your... You have been walking with Jesus a long time, right? So when did that start? Like, when would you say that started?
Started pretty early on, but I never really established a relationship with him until sophomore year of high school when I understood it and I started actually finding my own faith instead of basing it off of my parents or my siblings. You know, that was a really long road, but I eventually got there, and that's really where my relationship with God started, for sure.
So really, you've been a part of LCBC your entire life, and you're a senior.
I am.
Which is crazy. So you're about to graduate.
Yeah.
You excited about that?
I'm really excited. I'm waiting, but it's bittersweet, obviously, but I'm really excited to enter that transition into college and just experiencing a lot more adulting, for sure.
How has Financial Peace University, and you starting to implement some of these other changes, how would you say that has affected your spiritual life or your walk with Jesus?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say my original motivation was obviously for financial purposes, and I never thought that it would change other aspects of my life, obviously. But, in the first week when it was talking about, hey, we need to trust and surrender to him and being able to handle our money God's way and not our own way. And I started looking at my own life and saying, okay, well, if I can trust God with my finances, what are other areas of my life where I haven't completely surrendered to him or I haven't fully trusted in him? Because it's really easy to view your finances as such a small little thing, and then you start noticing that there's so many other areas. And so that's what I noticed. And for one thing that I was struggling with for the past couple of years was an eating disorder. So I was struggling with anorexia, and I struggled with it since my junior year, and it was kind of just like a roller coaster of, points of prosperity and then points of hardship, and it wasn't something that I had fully given to God. I remember, mid-senior year, right before FPU, that's where my eating disorder was at its hardest, and I felt so hopeless in a sense, and I started defining myself by it and saying, you know what, this is just who I am. This is what I'm gonna struggle with for the rest of my life. And so over those next couple of years, a faith that I thought I had started and I thought I was really strong, I felt a lot of shame from it. I felt pretty ashamed that I stood for a lot of morals and values, but I never believed them myself. And so it got to a really dark place senior year. and just a lot of pain and a lot of hardship, both physically and spiritually. I kept saying, this is just the life I'm going to live, because that is apparently God's plan for me. And then in the first week of FPU, that's when God was saying, that's not my plan for you. You know, I have a plan for you to have this rich and satisfying life, and what you're doing right now isn't a part of it, you know? And so when I was able to implement certain habits to discipline myself with my finances, that's when I started giving my eating disorder to God and saying, you know what? Just as much as this is God's money, this is also God's body, and I should be taking care of it in the way that I need to. I got back to the point of health where God wants me to be, making sure that I was feeding my body and just exercising for the right reasons, and making sure that I wasn't in toxic relationships anymore. You know, there were so many different habits and disciplines that I started to implement while I was also implementing cash envelopes and emergency fund. And it was just so interesting how it went completely hand in hand with where I am today versus where I was. You know, I am so happy, you know, where God has taken me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm like so proud of you. That you were beautifully made, and that you really are God's masterpiece. And you know, it's something that you can carry with you for the rest of your life. So thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What I love about Jenna's story is that she has a clear sense right now of what God might have in store for her life, and it's far better than what she's experiencing right now. Across our campus here in Ephrata, we have over 1,000 people finishing up FPU, and some stories already emerging of how people are just finding new ways to trust God in their lives. And so for all of us that just came through Financial Peace at Ephrata, and all of you, you know that the hard work starts now. Once you start to put some of those habits into place, you need to make sure that they last so that you can continue to live a new way of living, become more like the person that God wants you to become. And so just like Jenna's story, that story has just started to be written, and we're excited to hear more and more of those stories together as a church.